Reckless Ben's now finally free to talk about the bricks and minifigs case, and he's laying it all out in a wild part 3. Feed is now investigating alleged racial abuse against iShowSpeed, one of the biggest streamers in the world. Trump's now attacking NATO allies and says that the ceasefire with Iran's over, and you already have both sides launching dozens of strikes. You now have new footage that allegedly shows Tyler Robinson on campus the day Charlie Kirk was murdered. We're talking about breaking down and diving into all of that and even more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, starting with this. This all-out war between bricks and minifigs and Reckless Ben and just kind of the internet at large, it just keeps getting crazier and crazier, and we now have even more updates. And the reason you've got so much more to talk about now is that Ben, he's no longer silenced by a gag order, and so he's got a lot to say.
Right now, their strategy is to get me arrested before I get them arrested. So now, I'm gonna Uno reverse this and get Eamon, the CEO, arrested before he gets me arrested.
And to back up a little bit for all my beautiful normies out there who have lives that are not addicted to the internet, Ben is accusing Lego reseller Bricks and Minifigs of stealing a collection of Star Wars Legos from a man by the name of Brian Mansell that's worth around maybe $200,000, though that number has been contested, with the company claiming it's really more like $100,000.
I've heard everything from 70,000 to 200.
That's still a lot of money, right? Mansell, you had him entering into a consignment deal with a BAM franchise in Oregon, but corporate then seized that store and gave it to new owners, and Ben claims that that is when the Legos were stolen. So you then had Ben going on this crusade to get the Legos back, tracking down the CEO of BAM and the new owners of the franchise that initially entered in a consignment agreement to sell Brian's Legos. And to make a very long and involved story short, everything spirals out of control. BAM brings a RICO and defamation suit against Ben, his team, and Brian. They also then hit Ben with a gag order that prevented him from talking or posting content about bricks and minifigs.
And for the last couple months, this company's been doing whatever they can to get me arrested so they can keep all the Legos for themselves.
And when we last talked about all this insanity, Ben had posted a video claiming that BAM had agreed to lift the gag order while the rest of the case played out. But the judge overseeing the case refused to sign off on the paperwork lifting the gag order. And so then you had him saying that he took the matter to federal court. Eventually, the federal judge agreed to lift the gag order yesterday, saying in a court filing that Ben can resume talking about the case online, publishing court findings, and generally continue his investigative journalism. Though I will say, among other things, it does prevent Ben from going within 100 yards of the plaintiffs and any BAM property, and he's not allowed to solicit store employees for certain information. Right? And then very notably here, you had the court filing also saying that both sides agreed to move forward with mediation, indicating that they want to try and reach a settlement instead of going to trial, but also the outcome, it's still up in the air. But also regardless, Ben's now able to talk about this whole situation again, and so yesterday, he finally shared part 3 of his documentary series on Patreon.
I don't know what that was.
He posted
I
it
fucking moved my
unlisted on his
mouse.
YouTube channel. And what you have is this video, it goes beyond just the civil suit, right? You got Ben saying that there are 2 criminal cases against him. The first is in American Fork, Utah, and that's related to his efforts to track down and serve legal papers to the new owners who took over the Oregon franchise. And in that case, you got Ben claiming that he doesn't know exactly what he's being charged with because police body cam footage has been redacted. But you've also got prosecutors telling a judge that they need a protective order for new franchise owners that would prevent Ben from accessing that footage.
If this defendant were to represent himself and we were to provide body cams and discovery, we would be now providing additional information and fodder for this defendant to create videos from which he could profit by placing them on YouTube at the expense of our victim.
And you've got Ben saying that the judge agreed to sign the protective order, claiming that he didn't care about the evidence Ben says he presented. Then the bulk of the video, it's really focused on the second criminal case against Ben, which is in Provo, Utah, and it centers around his confrontation with the CEO of BAM, Amon McNeff, at BAM headquarters. And in that case, you got Ben saying that McNeff told police that he wanted to charge him with extortion.
They themselves
I cannot
say,
hit a hook.
You guys stole this product from this person. If you don't give it back, I'm going to burn the place down. Or we're going to burn the place down. Or I'll kill you.
But Ben, he claims that no one ever made those threats, and the video he filmed from the interaction proves it. Now, notably here, we've already seen big parts of that confrontation in Ben's earlier videos, with Ben repeatedly claiming that they show McNeff lying when he says that the company doesn't have Brian's Legos. And you have him repeating those claims again in part 3, while also claiming that McNeff's alleged lies amount to criminal obstruction of evidence.
Eamon McNeff actually committed a crime. I have tons of crimes on camera that Eamon McNeff has committed.
So Ben and his team, they go to the Provo Police Department to report the alleged obstruction crime, and he says that they agree to open an investigation. But then ultimately, you've got Ben getting a letter informing him that the police have actually taken up McNeff's case.
Yes, the case that had an overwhelming amount of evidence. They thought that case was garbage, and they took on the case that has 0 evidence at all. In the police body cam footage, after the police watched my full conversation, proving that I didn't threaten to burn the place down or literally anything, they even admitted to Eamon that there was no credibility with his entire case against me.
We agreed that there really was no extortion code that would fit your situation. However, you know, at the end of the day, we do want to help you guys, you know, having to deal with this fool and all of these issues. We did find that there was another code that fit, and it's called aggravated commercial obstruction. However, the tricky thing is that we have to prove that this individual either entered or remains unlawfully on the premise. When he came to the property, did you have to ask him more than once to leave?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, we're not leaving until we get it. And he's like, no.
Well, you've been again claiming that this video proves he never extorted McNeff. He does admit this.
But we did show back up a second time, and to Ammon's credit, about halfway through the conversation, he did say that if we don't leave, he's going to call the cops on us.
You can leave. If you come back here, we will call the cops. If you don't leave right now, I will call the cops.
And you've got Ben saying that after that, McNeff asked for proof of ownership over the Legos, claiming he didn't leave because he wanted to show him that proof. And so you have Ben claiming that he pulled up some footage to show McNeff, and that's when he asked them to leave the premises for the second time.
Now extortion?
Because we caught you guys?
No, because you are attempting to extort us. Okay, you've been asked to leave.
We have to leave? Okay. Well, thank you for working with us, and so see you later.
So Ben, he says that they left after that, but in the police body cam footage that Ben obtained, you can hear McNeff saying that he asked them to leave multiple times, and they did. And then later in the video, Ben plays audio from a court hearing where he tries to tell the prosecutor that his footage proves he never threatened McNeff during their interaction at corporate HQ. But the prosecutor replies that's because the footage only starts when Ben's going up the elevator and stops when he's coming back down, right? Rather than showing him entering and exiting the building itself. Strictly speaking, it doesn't show everything.
Obviously, a video doesn't necessarily show everything that possibly happened.
But notably here, you had a local outlet in Utah reporting that prosecutors didn't actually charge Ben with extortion or aggravated commercial obstruction in the Provo case. Instead, saying they charged him with disorderly conduct and trespassing. But then also, beyond that, you had Ben tackling this whole dispute over who's got the correct store inventory list. Right? Because according to Brian and the former store owner, they have an inventory from the day the store was seized that showed which sets were still in their possession. The corporate, they've said that the inventory is wrong and that they conducted their own correct inventory when they took over the store. And on top of that, you have McNeff claiming that Bricks and Minifigs repeatedly offered to give Brian their version of the inventory as well as some Legos, but that Brian always refused. But then the thing is there, you've got Brian, Ben, and the former store owner all saying the opposite, saying that they've been requesting the inventory for over a year and they've just gotten stonewalled.
Actually,
you have Ben
1 HP.
publishing an email thread that he claims shows Bricks and Minifigs ghosting Brian's lawyers and then eventually responding that the new store owners have no legal obligation to return any Legos to Brian. Meanwhile, during Ben's confrontation with McNeff at corporate HQ, the CEO apparently promised to send him the inventory if he just requests it through this one specific email. But you've got Ben saying that when he did that, the response he got was,
Mr. Schneider, BAM Franchising Incorporation will not participate in any form of communication that appears designed for public provocation, harassment, or manipulation of facts for the purpose of media content. Attempts to obtain privileged or confidential information through misrepresentation or the creation of fraudulent documents.
So you have him speculating that the whole thing, it was really just a trap, that McNeff only told him to email for the inventory so that corporate could get Ben's email address, and then
They subpoenaed Google asking for all private information tied to this email address. And Google sent them like hundreds of hours of all the raw footage from everything I've filmed to the Lego video so far. All my emails, all my search history, all the metadata that shows everywhere I've been.
right, and then after that, you have Ben claiming again that the police are colluding with BAM to pin him with trumped up charges, playing some clips from the body cam footage where the officers seemed dismissive of his allegations after he posted his first video and adding,
But at least now I can see why the police aren't listening to me. They're basically just saying that all of the evidence I submit to them is not credible and therefore case closed.
How did he get
Ben's
his
wrong
fucking
and
heart
you're
steal so
right,
much earlier than
because
me?
We said that the evidence is uncredible.
What?
At this point, Bricks and Minifigs is working with the police to just come up with whatever story they can to make any evidence I give them seem as uncredible as possible.
So yeah, as far as the meat of the story, that's where things stand right now. Or with what appears to be 2 criminal cases and at least 1 civil suit hanging over Ben's head. So again, I say appears because just a caveat to all this, right now we're really just getting Ben's perspective here about the whole video, and I'll be honest, the whole situation is just a fucking mess. Right, a lot of the details, they're still very unclear, and it's also gonna be very helpful for us to hear from the other side, the judges in this case, and it's just really hard to tell how much context is or is not missing. But for now, things are moving forward. Ben has got his mic back, and it is just, again, a continuation of an absolute PR nightmare for Bricks and Minifigs. And with all this, I will say, even despite the, I guess, the potential prison time that's hanging over his head, he seems to be having fun with all this.
If they want to apologize, they can say that they're sorry by doing the chicken dance. And I will take that as a sincere form of apology. And once they do the chicken dance, then I will know that Bricks and Minifigs is sorry, and we can finally move on to the next video series. It'll be awesome.
And while I'll technically say it is not clear how serious that offer is, he has also, I will say, promised that episode 4 is coming soon. And actually,
Also, subscribe to part 5
subscribe to part 6, part 7, all the way to part 100. We're doing 100 parts.
But hey, with this one just being a wild one to dive through and watch, I think I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts, opinions, and reactions here? And then there's more we gotta dive into in just a minute, but first, let me thank a sponsor and say, you know, there's a huge difference between not having the time to cook and not having time to eat. And for me, some days I've got time to make dinner, some days I'll heat something up, and some days lunch is just kind of whatever's closest. And that's exactly where today's sponsor, Huel, fits into my day. I like Huel because it's a complete meal, not something that you drink on top of food. It's what I reach for when the alternative is eating
Just
whatever I
can't
happen to find
move.
first. And personally, I've been using Huel Black Edition powder. It has over 40 grams of protein, 27 essential vitamins and minerals, no artificial sweeteners, colors, or flavors, and mixes with water or milk in about 30 seconds. So like if I'm running out the door, I'll grab the ready to. Biggest thing for me is that it removes the dispense my suggestion. You know, and thank you before and after the footage and supporting the show. But then diving right back into the news, we've got to talk about Charlie Kirk, because you've got new video footage that allegedly shows Tyler Robinson walking around Utah Valley University's campus before and after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Right, that, it ended up being one of the biggest reveals in court yesterday, along with the fact that Robinson allegedly interacted with Turning Point USA reps prior to the killing.
Do you believe you recognize who that person is?
Yes.
Who is that?
I believe that's Tyler Robinson.
All right, and where does he go from there?
He heads out of the parking garage on foot into the campus and actually goes to the quad area of the campus. At that time, he makes contact with some representatives from TPUSA.
You believe this is Mr. Robinson returning to campus?
I do, yes.
Okay. And why do you believe it's Mr. Robinson?
The shoes are the same.
He's noticeably wearing different clothing.
He is wearing different clothing, and he also is walking with a gait or a limp in this video. And again, in the top left corner, the individual is now seen running across the rooftop of the Losi building.
You believe this to be Mr. Robinson?
I do, yes.
And how long is he out there on the edge of the building?
Just until the reported shot was fired at 12:23 and 28.
Right, so that was a Utah prosecutor questioning Utah State Bureau of Investigation agent David Hull. You have them saying that these videos trace Robinson's alleged movements the day that Charlie was killed and even in the hours after. Right, with that investigator revealing that while the manhunt was taking place overnight, it appears that Robinson's car was about to make a turn onto the campus, but he was stopped by an officer who spoke to him. And while we don't know what was said, it resulted in that officer flagging the license plate.
I guess cop intuition, but there was something about the interaction that made him make a note of the license plate of the vehicle. And then subsequently, when information was available that that vehicle or a vehicle matching the description of that was involved in the incident, he ran the information that he had obtained from the start and was able to identify that it was registered to Mr. Robinson, and he had in fact had contact with Mr. Robinson on the morning of September 11th, 2025.
In all of this questioning, it's part of a week-long preliminary hearing where you have prosecutors trying to prove that they have enough evidence to take Tyler Robinson to trial for the murder of Charlie Kirk. And while this hearing, it's not a trial itself, you've got outlets saying it kind of will resemble a mini trial as prosecutors put together their evidence and officers provide testimony. And so then with that, it'll also give us insight into the defense's strategy here, especially since Robinson has yet to enter a plea. Also, you're seeing that Erica Kirk's been attending the hearing, as have Charlie's parents and other guests like Donald Trump Jr., putting them all in the same room with the alleged killer. And as for what his family has to say, well, before the hearing kicked off, Erica released a joint statement from her, his parents, and sisters saying that every court proceeding has been incredibly painful, and adding, out of respect for the judicial process, we will not be commenting further at this time. We ask for continued privacy as we navigate this process in immense grief. And with all this, there's been a ton of tension in these hearings over a number of matters, including that footage you just saw. Because on Monday, when other videos were presented to the court, the public didn't get to see them. It was only viewable to those inside. So you had that prompting just a ton of outrage among people who've been closely following this case, and they wanted to get the insight provided by these videos. And while Robinson's lawyer wanted to prevent surveillance footage of him going public to protect his right to a fair trial, yesterday you had the judge allowing us to get a peek of some videos. Also, there's been a ton of back and forth about DNA that's being admitted, and that's because you have investigators saying that they have found the alleged murder weapon wrapped in a towel in a wooded area near where the assassination took place. And the towel appears to have the DNA of two people. Robinson's roommate, who's cooperated with the prosecution, and the second is likely Robinson. For the defense, they've been questioning the reliability of that DNA, arguing that it is not a conclusive match. And that, of course, is not going to be the only time that Robinson's roommate comes up, as you have prosecutors likely going to be focusing on a note that he allegedly wrote to his roommate saying, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." And of course, this hearing, it's drawn a lot of attention. According to the AP, some spectators camped outside of the courthouse overnight to be able to get inside. You've also seen responses kind of from all over the place. You had Trump Jr., who, like we said, was present, going on Fox News to say that he thinks a very clear case is being formed against Robinson.
But having literally been there in the room, seen the evidence with my own eyes, it's very clear to me that Tyler Robinson will be found guilty.
But also a big thing here is like, kind of no matter what happens in that courtroom, there are going to be people who just do not believe what the prosecutors are saying. Right, and connected to that, you're the New York Times speaking to some of the people that were outside of the courthouse, and I mean, some, they think Charlie isn't even actually dead. There are also then others who think we barely scratched the surface when it comes to his killing. And then I guess also on that note, you've got people like Candace Owens sounding off about these hearings as well, because before they began, she wrote, "You will hear the Fed's narrative absent any ability for the defense to meaningfully dispute it. What you can expect, aside from Erica's tears, are an orbit of her payrolled influencers trying to convince you that the unvetted evidence is overwhelming and undeniable, saying the real trial will come later. Charlie's army is growing. Ultimately, truth will win." And she has spent the days since questioning the evidence being put forward, implying that the videos played do not actually show Robinson, and also fighting with leaders in TPUSA and Ben Shapiro. But also, as far as what's next, I mean, very likely this is going to be heading to trial. Where prosecutors, they don't even have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Robinson is responsible for Kirk's death here, just that there is probable cause for him to be tried. Right, so you've got a lower burden of proof right now. And so while understandably, you're going to have a lot of people focused on this, talking about this, this is really the stage getting set for the full thing to play out. You know, while it may take years for like that entire process to play out,
it's going to be a long trial.
It might be shattered into pieces by the end of today. And that's if it's not already been shattered. Because you even have Trump himself saying that the ceasefire deal is over. Oil prices, they're already spiking again. And ultimately, the only successful deal this man has reached with Iran, it might have been the one that lets it choose which of its citizens are okay to be deported from the US after seeking asylum for fear of being imprisoned, tortured, or executed back home. But starting with the war, let's do a little recap. Because last month, you had the US and Iran signing this 14-point MOU that was supposed to end the war, reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and kick off a 60-day negotiating period to reach a final deal addressing various other issues. You know, the small stuff like the fate of Iran's nuclear program, little things. The talks to reach this final deal had been due to start after a days-long funeral now underway for Iran's former supreme leader, who was assassinated by the US and Israel on the first day of the war. And while in the meantime, both sides, they were trading fire and accusing each other of violations, neither side abandoned the ceasefire entirely. You even saw a decent uptick in traffic through the strait, although of course there have still been far fewer ships passing through than before the war. And that waterway has also continued to be a major source of tension between the two sides. And that's partly because the MOU only says that Iran won't charge ships to transit the strait for 60 days, and it also says Iran will have a role in future administration and maritime services in the waterway. And so with the middle of the strait considered just too dangerous to travel because of the risk of mines that were laid by Iran's military, Iran's been demanding that ships pass through on its side. But at the same time, you've had the US Navy helping guide ships through the side closer to Oman, and Iran's accused the US of violating the MOU by trying to open new sea lanes without its permission. And actually connected to that, you have a trio of oil and gas tankers attacked in the strait yesterday. And while Iran, they never claimed responsibility, it's widely believed to have been behind the attacks. So you had the US appearing to respond first by revoking a sanctions waiver that allowed Iran to sell oil for 60 days. And then you had the military launching what it described as a new round of offensive strikes against over 80 targets in Iran, reportedly including Iranian air defense systems, command and control centers, coastal radar sites, anti-ship missile capabilities, and more than 60 Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps small ships in and near the strait. And you had US Central Command claiming these strikes aimed, quote, to degrade Iran's ability to continue attacking international commerce flowing through the international trade corridor. And then you had Iran's military responding by targeting 85 American military sites in Bahrain and Kuwait. Within all of this, leading to Trump reacting today by seeming to say that he's giving up on the current ceasefire.
To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people. And if they had a nuclear weapon, they'd use it. As far as I'm concerned, it's over.
And while you had Trump saying that he'd allow his negotiating team to continue talking with Iran, he also said that it's, quote, just a waste of time dealing with them. And then he also suggested that he might reinstate his naval blockade near the Strait of Hormuz, and said that he was probably, quote, going to hit them hard tonight.
He
even
to go
suggested that he's once again considering taking
lie.
Karg Island, right, the hub of Iran's oil industry, which could require putting boots on the ground, as well as similarly rehashing his threats to attack Iran's infrastructure and desalination plants, which again, experts have previously said could be a war crime. And all of that is, on the other side, you have the Iranian government questioning whether the ceasefire is really working. Or you had Iran's foreign ministry saying in a statement today that the US had made, quote, important and essential parts of the MOU signed last month ineffective. The statement pointing to the latest US attacks on Iran, as well as Israeli strikes on Lebanon, along with the reinstatement of sanctions and the, quote, violation of Iranian arrangements in the Strait of Hormuz. And so then, as far as reactions, you saw oil prices going to its highest level in weeks. Or you had Brent crude, the international benchmark, rising 6% to more than $78 a barrel. You've also got the national price of a gallon of gas in the US hitting $3.80 a gallon, though there I'll say, one, that's nowhere near the highs that we saw Trump get things to earlier this year, but two, it's still more than 27% higher than it was before Trump's war, and three, if the war is back on or whatever the hell happens from here, it could go back to the highs, if not go past those. So Trump, he appears really not to be worried by all this. Or at least, he's coming off like more baffled by the fact that his deal-making experience in the business world, it hasn't translated to international relations success.
I made a lot of money. I had a lot of great success. Tremendous success. Everything I did, I was successful. And I deal with these
Doesn't
guys.
he have like
I say, this is
20
from a different
bankrupted businesses?
school. They're liars. They're cheats. They're sick people. They've hurt their people. They killed 54,000 people as of now that were protesting. You know, when people say, how come they haven't taken over? They can't take over. Because they're dead.
And Trump's apparent, disdain for the Iranian regime, like how it treats its people, it stands out for a number of reasons. One, because even though a lot of people with memory hold it, you have people pointing to the fact that Trump was sending ICE to cities, American citizens were shot and killed on the street. So obviously not at the level of tens of thousands, but then also two, during Trump's second term, the U.S. has sent back more than 100 Iranians. And that includes, according to their lawyers, people at risk of being arrested, tortured, or even killed. The most recent deportation flight, it's believed to have taken place only weeks after the regime's crackdown on anti-government protests left thousands dead. Now, you've got a new lawsuit claiming that the Trump administration not only sent people back to Iran, but they actually worked with the Iranian officials to give them the people they specifically wanted. The lawsuit even says that immigration officials broke the law by sharing the names and immigration records of Iranian citizens who were seeking asylum in the United States and then allowed Iran to select specific individuals for deportation. This including dissidents, members of Christian minorities, and people who had participated in movements advocating for women's and LGBTQ+ rights.
If that's true, that's unhinged.
The two sides worked in tandem to pressure these Iranian detainees to forego their rights and to coerce them to agree to return to Iran without assurances for their safety upon return. And so overall, the situation with Iran, it's just a nightmare, chaotic mess. There's so many layers. It's like a 7-layer Trump fuck-up lasagna. Just handcrafted, homemade. Right? No one seems to be able to quite fuck it up like Grandpa can. And then we've got even more we got to dive into in just another minute. But first, let me thank a sponsor and say, at this point, hearing about another massive data leak, it almost feels like checking the weather. And one recent exposure included 149 million usernames and passwords from major online services. One of the huge problems is that once that information gets out there, it doesn't just disappear. It gets copied, sold, and reused. And that's why I like having today's sponsor, Incogni, working in the background. Because one of the biggest weird parts is that it's usually not the company you gave your information to that's the problem. It's all the companies you've never heard of that bought it afterward. Incogni works behind the scenes, contacting those data brokers and requesting your information be removed, so you're not stuck chasing companies you didn't even know existed. They've also added custom removals, so if you find your information on a people search site or another website, their privacy team can request those removals too, with the unlimited and family unlimited plans. And I really like logging into my dashboard and seeing that progress. It's nice knowing that something's actually happening instead of just hoping my information disappears on its own. And while you can't stop every data breach, you can make it a whole lot harder for your personal information to keep circulating. So hey, scan that QR code or go to incogni.com/DeFranco and use code DeFranco for 60% off. That's incogni.com/DeFranco, code DeFranco to get your personal data off the market. And then for your final block today, we have more news you need to know, starting with FIFA. They just launched a major racism investigation, and you have ayyy at the center of the whole thing. Right, Speed, if you don't know, he's one of the biggest live streamers in the world. He's been live streaming this year's matches to his tens of millions of followers. With that,
that's crazy.
Also
You got
apparently went
permission for
sideways
that.
at the Argentina-Cape Verde game in Miami, Florida.
The idea that FIFA fucking gave them.
What are you saying? Like, what are you even saying, bro?
FIFA to give him permission is insane.
You have some reports saying that at some point while the fan was yelling at Speed, she said, "Go cry to the zoo." And then you had other reports claiming she also said, "N-word, go home." And that's also in addition to another situation that's now blown up where it appears that a fan seems to be making maybe monkey gestures at him. All while the online comments, a lot of those have been pretty bad as well. Some saying he acts like a stupid ass animal, and some saying he, quote, deserved a lot of what Argentina's fans said about him. So with all of this playing out, you had FIFA responding saying they strongly condemn racism, hate, and discrimination in all forms, and adding that the FIFA World Cup is a celebration of unity, diversity, and respect, and saying anyone who acts in a manner that undermines those values is not welcome in our game. Right, and you also have this coming just a few days after a senator from Paraguay had an absolute Karen meltdown against Mbappe, posting things like, "That brute never even learned to write. Instead of breast milk, he sucked on coconuts, and the most educated creatures he ever listened to were chimpanzees." And then even before that, you had Belgium coach Rudy Garcia saying that the Senegal was one of those teams that tend to lose their tactical structure towards the end of their match. With critics there claiming that his comments hit on racial stereotypes of African teams being powerful and instinctive, yet tactically naive, emotionally fragile, or unable to withstand pressure. And while you had him trying to clear that up, saying
that last
one's
one's
teams
wild,
accustomed
a
to
little bit
managing lead
reaching.
in high-level World Cup matches, not just African teams, a lot of people, they just weren't buying that. But at the same time, you've got a lot of people pointing out that these racial issues, they're not new. For years, you've had people calling for some type of protection to make the World Cup a comfortable experience for everyone. Well, FIFA, they've made some steps in the right directions by calling the situations out and making their stands clear. There's still a long way to go, which is why you've got people saying things like, we need to have constant forms of anti-racism education and campaigns to make sure the beautiful game really is beautiful.
Well,
not just
GG.
a slogan that FIFA likes to use for marketing purposes, but a beautiful game in which diverse populations, different countries come together to celebrate sport and football. Also in the news, we have even more Graham Plattner news, or rather updates. And that because his ex, Lindsay Fifield, she just accused him of repeatedly taking off condoms without her consent during sex. Ray Fifield dated him from 2013 to 2015, and last month she told the New York Times that he was physically abusive. Also saying she made journal entries after their breakup, calling him the most toxic, literally abusive man on earth who destroyed her life. She also said she only ever mentioned him removing condoms in off-the-record interviews because she was too embarrassed to say anything about it publicly at first. With that, claiming it happened 6 times while they were together. And also she claims that, quote, she confronted him both during and after sex because he knew that she wasn't on birth control and how dangerous that was. But then with that, you had her claiming that he would just, quote, act cute about it. And now you have her saying that she's going public to show that Jenny Rasicote, who we talked about yesterday, was not alone in her allegations. And then on top of that, she felt like she needed to say something for the sake of the voters as well.
They needed to know the truth. They needed to know, because these things translate. It's not like the things that he does in private in his relationships with women, the things that he has done to women, coercive control, lying, deception, abuse. You can't be that way in private and not have it translate into how you would govern or how you would, when you're put in a position of power.
Well, as of recording, Plattner hasn't responded to this most recent allegation. He did post a video earlier this week in response to kind of everything else, saying any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically false. And all the while, you've also got Maine Democrats still scrambling to figure out what the hell they're going to do if he ends up dropping out of the race, as is expected. With that, you're seeing some reports even claiming that his team is trying to influence the process to replace him, or with the party apparently pushing back there. And then for our final bit of news today, we jump from Maine all the way over to Texas, where you have Ken Paxton, Mr. Self-described anti-voter fraud himself, now being accused of doing that exact crime 6 times over. Because apparently, for the last 2 years, he's been using an old address on his voter registration. You have that including the one that he used to vote in the May runoff that made him the Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate in Texas. And you had this all coming out when he split from his wife. Because in 2025, his wife said in a divorce filing that Paxton had moved out of their Collin County home the year before that. And you're reporting from ProPublica and the Texas Tribune that have linked him to a home in Denton County since February. But, interestingly enough, his voting records, they say otherwise. And so with this, they apparently reached out to him multiple times last month, asking about the situation. I'm talking phone calls, voicemails, emails, but up until this week, they were quiet. That is, until a spokesperson from his team issued a statement saying that Paxton has been a national leader on election integrity with a long record of defending Texas elections, and adding that attempting to insinuate otherwise and tear him down with a baseless, lie-filled tabloid story is not real reporting. Though also, I got to put all this into perspective. Earlier this year, you had Paxton launching a tip line specifically for people to report suspected cases of voter fraud, where he said free and fair elections are a cornerstone of a thriving republic. We will stop at nothing to uncover and stop any illegal voting activity. Or even had him putting out information about election laws in Texas, which said specifically you must register to vote using the address of where you reside. And really, the only loophole to that law is if you're someone like a college student who's living in a dorm, but you still plan on going back home to an old address at some point. And there, you've got election experts saying things like, when you start doing things that suggest, oh, I've fully moved, I'm just wink wink saying I intend to return, that's when you get into questionable territory. And I don't know, I guess to me, nothing says I've fully moved like a divorce after your wife accuses you of cheating. So I think things could get rough from Paxton here if laws matter. And I say it like that because I feel like a number of Republicans, especially over the last 2 years, have made it so that we should feel like laws don't matter, but we should remember they should still matter. And while usually in a situation like this, if true, it could be hard to prosecute because you have to prove that someone intentionally broke the law. As others have pointed out with Paxton, certainly the chief law enforcement officer of the state of Texas, someone who has made claims about election integrity and made it a priority of his office, should be charged with knowing the laws. And others adding, when our elected officials who are tasked with passing and enforcing these laws exhibit troubles in engaging with the voting process themselves, that raises serious questions. So we'll have to wait to see what Paxton has to say here, if he says anything, if there is a real chance that this could cause some issues for him in the future. But that, my friend, you beautiful bastard, is the end of your Wednesday show. But also, do I have a wild ride ahead for you? If you'd like, you should now, if you have not already, go watch today's new Crashing Out episode. Think of it as the Wednesday after show. If this show is 90% news, 10% opinion, that is the polar opposite. And I'm actually going to leave you with a 2-minute preview of today's episode because it really embodies what the show is which is me poking and prodding Alex to go on rants. Some of it happens on camera, some happens off, but then, what a ride. So enjoy, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Phil, Mitch McConnell's probably dead, and I'm not allowed to talk about it on most platforms, but I'm gonna try to talk about it on this platform because this isn't fucking TikTok. Am I deep enough? Was I deep enough in? Was I allowed to curse this soon?
I think you're fine.
I'm being silenced everywhere because I want to tap dance, and nobody
She
wants
just
me
healed
to tap
400?
dance. People are like, oh, you shouldn't talk bad about Mitch McConnell. He can't hear me. He's brain dead. He's brain dead.
He does
like
seem
the
pretty brain
Emperor of
dead from everything I've seen.
Life in occupied Crimea is beginning to break down, and Russia has no idea how to stop it. Across the last couple of months, and especially in the span of the last few weeks, Ukrainian forces have hammered the Crimean Peninsula at long range in a constant barrage of drones and missiles that's only getting more intense by the day. The fuel supply has run out, tens of thousands of people are trying to escape while they can, and chaos, panic, and even hunger are starting to really set in. Ukraine's intention isn't to invade Crimea and take it back, or at least not yet. Instead, Ukraine intends to make Crimea truly, completely ungovernable and force its Russian occupiers into a state of total breakdown. But through its long-range siege of the territory, Ukraine hopes to do more than simply degrade the Russian military. Instead, Kyiv is trying to lure Moscow into a trap, and right now the strategy seems to be working rather flawlessly. Russia has occupied Crimea since 2014 and regards it as annexed Russian territory. It's the crown jewel of Vladimir Putin's military project in Ukraine and the pride and joy of the Russian elite. To defend Crimea is an increasingly costly and dangerous proposition, but to abandon Crimea is unthinkable. The trouble for Russia, of course, is that that's exactly what Ukraine is betting on. A few months before this episode was released, something changed on the battlefields of eastern Ukraine. After years of fast-paced, highly innovative drone warfare near the front lines, Kyiv unveiled a new suite of drones optimized for a different purpose. Not to attack at short or long range, but at mid-range. AI-enabled, cheap to use in massive numbers, and surprisingly fast, the new drones subverted many of the expectations that both sides of this war had learned to live by. Russian jamming was no longer effective, and Ukraine no longer had to worry about maintaining a heavy, cumbersome connection to its drones through fiber optic cables. At the start of the spring fighting season, Ukraine used its new tools for a very specific purpose: to undercut the supply lines and logistics that would have powered a massive Russian spring offensive and throw that offensive into complete disarray. By this May, Ukraine had secured drone dominance in the eastern Donbass region, where the main thrust of Russia's offensive was supposed to take place. The fighting in that area still continues, and Russia is grinding forward incredibly slowly at massive cost in a war where, according to recent posts by Russian military bloggers, Moscow's troops along some parts of the front have a life expectancy of 20 to 35 minutes once they reach the front line. Now that Ukraine has established control of the situation there, its mid-range drone forces have a bit of spare capacity, and most of that capacity is now focused on Crimea. To understand the way Ukraine has structured its Crimea campaign, we first have to understand something about this territory. It's relatively isolated, mostly surrounded by water, and has no natural land connection to the Russian mainland. That's a problem the Kremlin has worked very hard to rectify, first by establishing reliable ferry and ship infrastructure, then by building the prized Kerch Strait Bridge that opened in 2018, and finally by constructing a network of highway and rail lines running through the occupied Ukrainian east. Those routes through occupied territory have been especially important. They've made the Kerch Bridge less of a practical target for Ukraine, and they've greatly increased the volume of supplies, fuel, and fighting equipment that can reach the peninsula. But because of the way this war has gone before 2026, Russia's ambitions in Crimea could basically be summed up as guard duty. The Black Sea Fleet has been mostly forced to abandon the area due to the constant threat of Ukrainian sea drones, but Russia's front lines were holding. The routes through occupied territory were safe, and Ukraine had neither the manpower nor the positional advantages that would allow for a direct assault on the area. So when Ukrainian mid-range drones started to target Crimea, they didn't focus on the territory itself as much as they focused on the supply chain. Those routes through occupied territory, and especially a key highway known as the R280, were well within range of Ukrainian drones. The routes weren't unguarded exactly, but they were minimally guarded, with mobile air defense teams using machine guns and a handful of more capable surface-to-air systems. Ukraine turned its attention to the R280, but the rest was history. Open source trackers indicate that many hundreds of supply and fuel trucks have been confirmed destroyed along the highway, and the true total is probably somewhere in the thousands. Ukraine has been especially diligent about striking fuel convoys, which sustain Crimea's military defense, but also its civil infrastructure. They went after train locomotives as well as the railway lines themselves. Ukraine also started targeting the road and rail bridges that lead into Crimean territory across a treacherous wetland area. As it turns out, Russia lacked the ability to really do anything about the Ukrainian offensive, and as Ukraine's campaign started to generate real results, Russia found itself unable to right the ship. Instead, the strikes have had a compounding effect, with every Ukrainian hit making subsequent hits more likely. With the R280 highway growing too dangerous, Russia has had to push its trucks onto back roads, where they have to drive much slower and create wear and tear on asphalt that's not built to handle them. Russia's thought to have lost hundreds of well-trained truck drivers who were tasked with doing a job that's much more difficult than global observers tend to give credit. Every destroyed bridge makes the surviving bridges more important, but also reduces the number of spots that Ukraine needs to surveil, meaning that those bridges are more easily targeted. The Russian military has tried to respond by using pontoon bridges, but those, well, they're getting blown up too. They've tried to shift to ferries.
I kind of walk up the
Ukrainian strikes
dance,
have now forced the ferry services to shut down as well. Better yet for Ukraine, Russia's reaction to devastating strikes elsewhere, especially at a critical refinery in Moscow, has been to shift its air defense systems back toward Russia's biggest cities. With finite air defenses available, that's only made Ukrainian strikes on Crimea easy to accomplish. And as Ukraine destroys more infrastructure across Russia and creates acknowledged fuel shortages in the vast majority of Russian oblasts, there's even less excess to go around. What Crimea has and what Russia can supply in the immediate vicinity becomes even more valuable, so it becomes even more costly to lose. And now that the stage has been properly set, Ukraine's drones have started pummeling Crimea itself. Over the course of several weeks, Ukraine destroyed all of Crimea's above-ground fuel storage capacity, along with power stations, electrical wires, and other hard-to-replace energy assets. Crimea's leaders imposed limits on the amount of fuel that could go to civilians, then required vouchers that only government employees could easily access, and now even the vouchers don't count for much. Satellite imagery and traffic mapping indicates that when people do get enough fuel to drive, they're mostly headed to the Kerch Strait Bridge, waiting in long lines of traffic to try and reach safer territory. And by Crimean-occupied leaders' own admission, the drone strikes are now constant. Quoting one official during a radio broadcast from the territory, Crimea's air defense sirens don't go off anymore because, quote, sirens would be sounding 22 hours a day and nobody would get any sleep. At this point, Ukrainian operations would seem to suggest that they're running out of high-value energy targets on the peninsula itself. They're still keeping up pressure, destroying water infrastructure, communications equipment, and more, but at the same time, Ukrainian strikes have started to expand laterally toward the nearest Russian territory. There, Ukraine is destroying the oil refineries that prepare the fuel destined for Crimea, forcing trucks and trains to take longer, slower, and more obvious journeys, and raising the real possibility that they might be next. At every stage of this campaign, Ukraine's drone tactics come back to one simple but unavoidable principle: thinning the herd. Unlike the situation on the front lines, where Russia doesn't particularly value the lives of its troops and clearly considers them expendable, Ukraine is now targeting finite resources that Russia regards as essential. No matter what, Russia must keep moving fuel and supplies to Crimea, and it must keep as many of its refineries and other facilities operational as possible. That means there isn't really a world where Ukraine deters Russia so completely that it just moves its valuable resources into safer areas outside drone range. Russia is under pressure to push resources into the conflict zone, despite the danger, so everything Ukraine destroys makes future drone strikes even easier. Bridges, for example, are choke points. Blow up half of them and the rest have to handle double the traffic. Trucks in ordinary time saturate the roads, and individual trucks and their drivers can try to hide in a crowd. But when there are only a couple of trucks on the road, Ukraine only needs to put a few drones in the sky to keep up. Destroy a few refineries, and Ukraine can expect the others to be working at full capacity when they're eventually hit, because Russia has no choice but to try and fill its shortfall somehow. Now, in just a moment, we're going to talk about why Russia cares about Crimea so much. But before we get there, a quick pause to tell you about our subscriber site. Fronts.co is our outlet for all the stories we don't have space to tell. Recently, we published elsewhere, but our Middle East Roundtable on the Iran conflict, the fifth video. Decay and dismay. So look, as we've already laid out, Ukraine's strikes against Crimea don't happen in a vacuum. Crimea is in such an acute state of crisis because Ukraine is chipping away at the much larger network that sustains the peninsula, whether from the occupied territories or from mainland Russia. But that's hardly a one-way relationship, and now the impact of the long-range Crimea campaign is starting to show up elsewhere. Russia's biggest challenges have come on the front lines, especially in the southern oblasts of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia. These are areas where the fighting has been relatively less intense compared to what's happening in Donetsk, but Ukrainian and Russian forces are still continually engaged in combat. those Russian soldiers rely on Crimea as a supply base and a real logistical hub, where, before the recent changes, Russian commanders could count on consistent deliveries and other forms of support. But when Ukraine destroys the infrastructure that brings fuel into Crimea, it also destroys the infrastructure that would allow the military supplies to move out. According to both the Russian Milborger class and the reports emerging from the Ukrainian side of the front line, Russia's troops in that area are under extraordinary pressure. At the start of the year, Ukrainian troops achieved several limited victories and territorial recaptures in the south. But now, Russian troops are starting to withdraw from key territory without a fight. A prime example of that change is what's happening on the Kinburn Spit, a long, thin sandbar that stretches out toward the mouth of the major river that marks a portion of the front line. There, Russia was forced to abandon several key positions, and Ukraine has even managed to place a flag on the territory, although the sandbar remains contested for now. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Russian leaders have continued to helpfully illustrate just where Crimea fits into their hierarchy of important territories. It's less important than Moscow or St. Petersburg, of course, and Putin isn't yet willing to abandon the front line in order to make sure that Crimea is protected. But as we've alluded to, Crimea is extremely important to Russia in its own right. It's a highly symbolic territory, both because it represents the pinnacle of Russian conquest and because it's been held up as such a clear success case for the cultural Russification of the occupied territories. It's very important to Russian elites as a high-demand vacation spot, and for the Russian military as a supply hub, a base for the Black Sea Fleet, and a strategic anchor in a complex, important part of the ocean. Even worse, Moscow has poured immense sums of money into the territory to remake it in the Russian image, connect it to Russian territory, and increase its perceived value and importance in the eyes of the Russian people. As former Ukrainian Minister of Defense Andriy Zagorodnyuk explained it to the Wall Street Journal, quote, "For Putin, Crimea is turning from an asset to a liability. This was his signature acquisition, and he is unable to exercise control." Now, for all those reasons, Russia really can't stop itself from defending Crimea. But this is exactly the Ukrainian trap that we mentioned earlier. It costs Ukraine very little to keep hitting the peninsula, especially in a long-range campaign where Ukrainian soldiers aren't at immediate risk. Russia, meanwhile, has to keep pouring air defenses, fuel, soldiers, and supplies into Crimea by any means necessary, including by replacing trucks, ferries, and even bridges wherever it can. Abandoning Crimea is simply not an option. That's an admission of defeat that Putin couldn't hide, and that his military operation probably wouldn't survive. The only path forward is to continue pouring resources into the territory in hopes that something might change on the Ukrainian side. Right now, though, there just isn't any sign that Ukraine would start slowing down. With all of that being said, we do want to emphasize that a Ukrainian ground operation to retake Crimea remains highly unlikely in the near term. Ukraine faces several strategic and tactical barriers that would make an offensive nearly impossible. Serious and chronic manpower shortages, substantial occupied territory between Crimea and the Ukrainian front lines, and the fact that because Ukraine destroyed the bridges onto the peninsula, it would have no choice but to attempt an extremely risky amphibious landing. But right now, Ukraine doesn't need to reclaim Crimea directly, and the resource trap that Ukraine has built for Russia might actually be more valuable in the long run. After all, if Ukraine keeps up the pressure and continues to make Russia bleed, then an eventual operation to retake Crimea will just keep getting easier and easier. There is, however, one major symbolic victory that Ukraine might try to achieve relatively soon: the permanent destruction of the Kerch Strait Bridge. Recently, Ukraine's kept up pressure on the bridge, launching enough drones in that direction to keep local defenders on guard, but it hasn't really been a primary target, and there's good reason for that. According to Ukrainian intelligence officials, the bridge has been structurally compromised for some time, which is part of why Russia has restricted the transfer of heavier loads, especially fuel. But by destroying all of the other bridges and mechanisms that Russia has been relying on to transfer fuel, Ukraine creates the same critical bottleneck that it's made everywhere else. Soon enough, Russia will only have two choices: ship fuel across the compromised bridge, or don't provide fuel to Crimea at all. The trouble, of course, is that those fuel shipments can be targeted, and if Ukraine manages to strike a large shipment at the right time, then it can convert that Russian fuel into a massive bomb on a compromised bridge that would have become Crimea's final lifeline. As of today, the bridge is overwhelmed by those traffic jams we mentioned earlier, thousands of civilians who've realized that it's time to leave. For that reason, Ukraine isn't likely to strike the bridge at the height of the evacuation. But once that traffic thins out, and there's less stress on the bridge apparatus itself, Russia might try to bring large shipments across, providing the opportunity that Ukraine has been trying to create. Or maybe Russia doesn't take the risk, and Crimea runs out of fuel, and then air defenses, and then perhaps even soldiers. For Moscow, it's a lose-lose proposition. But then again, that's what the siege of Crimea was built to create. Thank you for watching.
you're an idiot. No, you're an idiot. Right? No, you're a bigger idiot. No, you're an even bigger idiot. Right? That's not an argument as far as the logicians. That's just people yelling at each other. An argument is a structure of proposition. If the one person had said, no, you are an
This Gideon situation, it's got people on the internet freaking out, sounding off, and also saying that it actually exposes a much bigger problem. Right? If you're not familiar with Gideon, we'll call him a reformed YouTube prankster turned predator catcher. And he's been at the center of this just very humiliating controversy that he put himself into, and it has him now saying,
Thought I could survive another auto.
You know, genuinely, I love streaming, but it's just too much bad comes with it.
And to fully understand and appreciate the situation we're in now and what this means for even more people moving forward, it's important to know that he has kind of had a dramatic arc over the past several years. Right? He was starting as a prankster in 2019, or as other people would call it, a public nuisance streamer who kind of harassed people for clicks. And over the next few years, he'd go viral for things like pretending to kidnap a kid, encouraging people to say racial slurs, disrupting college classrooms, that kind of thing. Right? And so you had him getting kicked out of large events. He got permabanned from Twitch a few years ago, and he's apologized more than once for his behavior. But then you have all of this reaching a new level last month in the small town of Woodhaven, Michigan. Because fellow YouTuber Skeeter Gene, he claimed that his Uncle Joe, he'd been financially exploiting and abusing his grandmother, or Joe's mother, for a decade by squatting at her house despite warnings from the family to leave. And so in a plan to force Joe out, he had Gideon move into the house. And it actually seemed to work. Or with Joe seeming to flee to a local McDonald's, but Gideon, Skeeter Gene, their crew, and a handful of fans, they followed him there. So Joe, he calls the cops. An officer then tells them, hey, y'all have to leave or you're gonna be arrested for trespassing, since the McDonald's doesn't want them there either. But they then appear to kind of just stand on the sidewalk, continuing to yell and talk to drivers, entering the lot, and then a couple of their crew members tried to go inside the restaurant, which is when the cops whipped out the handcuffs.
Wait, so what are we doing? Breach of peace. Breach of peace? Breach of peace, stalking, trespassing.
Bro, this is the made I've seen in my life. This is a violation of rights. This is a violation. You cannot arrest somebody that never went inside and was never trespassed. Now, they are arrested children that never went inside of a McDonald's. Call the DA and see how fast that gets dropped.
He's yelling, so he's being disorderly. You're under arrest for being disorderly.
Freedom of speech. You can yell on the sidewalk.
Sitting here causing the scene.
Do you want to waste your DA's time? I am a multi-millionaire. I promise you, I can take this as far as you want.
I don't understand all this, dude. Like, over nothing. Like, something so stupid over some, like, YouTube views.
And so Gideon, he's been charged with breach of peace and stalking. The pretrial set for next week, and he says that he spent 6 figures on legal fees. And while he's actually facing jail time, though, I don't think he's actually going to get it. The bigger risk for him, potentially, is his reputation is now in tatters. Because you see, a couple of years ago, he apparently decides, hey, I'm going to turn my act around. He supposedly has this come to Jesus moment in the back of an Uber.
I was with my girl. We were Ubering back from her college, and then right when we got back to the crib, the Uber driver, she looked back at us and she asked us a question. She said, if you guys were to die right now, would you go to heaven or would you go to hell? I had to be honest with myself. I had to look into myself, and I was like, the way I'm living right now, if God was to take my breath away right now, I'm going to hell.
So he deletes most of his old prank videos. He starts doing this to Catch a Predator style content where he confronts men who supposedly messaged underage girls.
You say you want to kiss your lips while sliding my tongue deep inside as I slowly lick and suck on your clit.
I don't remember it, but if it's there, it's there.
And so essentially, Gideon's kind of rebranded himself as a public servant rather than a public nuisance, and it seemed to really work. He's been extremely successful with it. But now with this whole situation with Skeeter Gene, you got a lot of his fans saying, oh, it's actually the old him. And what people really seem to be latching on to is the I'm a millionaire comment, which came off as incredibly arrogant, especially given the way that he talked back when he said he turned his life to Christ.
This fortune that I have on earth is nothing compared to the fortune I can have in the kingdom of heaven.
And so now, after the genuinely huge blow up from his arrest and the raw footage genuinely getting posted online by the Code Blue body cam channel, you have people wondering, is Gideon having a second born again moment genuinely?
Genuinely, during the last few weeks, I've done a lot of just like inward reflection, and I've been talking to my fiance a lot, and I just kind of came to realize, you know, what I was doing wrong. I was genuinely losing a lot. And while I still don't think
Keep getting greedy with my zone, yes.
I've come to realize that, you know, genuinely streaming makes me the worst me. You see somebody in the chat say boring or L stream or something like that, and then it flips a switch in you where you want to be more entertaining and you want to, you know, pump up the levels and everything, and you want to entertain.
And you had him saying that, you know, almost every scandal or controversy he's gotten himself into, it's been caused by something he did while he was streaming. Pointing, for example, to his feud with Pokimane, when her stream got flooded with negative comments from people who appear to be Gideon's fans, with her at the time tweeting that the hate women and gay men receive has become so normalized, which Gideon shot back. My dislike for her has nothing to do with her gender, but her as a person. And while he did eventually apologize, it wasn't before Twitch banned it. And then as another example, he pointed to his drama with the Paul brothers when he quit the Prime Squad after beating with Jake and supporting Logan's opponent in a UFC fight. But anyway, Gideon says that the desire for affirmation makes streaming so addictive, and that's what keeps pushing him over the edge.
I have a fragile ego where like I let comments and things people say affect me. And I realized like the last couple of days, I feel like the reason why I got to this point is because I haven't been reading comments. It's because I haven't been looking at videos about me talking about the situation. And it's letting me come to a more clearer view.
Though he also later seemed to contradict himself there, admitting that he has been reading the comments since his arrest.
I've seen some of you guys in the comment section like calling it out, like, Jadeon, you're going back to your old self, you know what I mean? Like dibbling, dabbling in pranks and stuff like that. I'm getting spammed up with, I'm a multi-millionaire.
You also had him going back and forth on whether this was even an apology video, at first saying,
I'm not on here, you know, apologizing or anything, because I don't owe you guys an apology, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't affect any of y'all.
But then later saying,
I do want to apologize for one thing, and that is, I apologize for the distractions. I apologize for the slop content, and I apologize for pretty much forgetting about the mission. I need to grow up. I need to take accountability, and I need to mature.
But regardless, he says the conclusion is that he's done.
The shenanigans are stopping. The shenanigans are over. I don't know how to control myself, and so the best way to control myself is to distance myself. I quit streaming. I quit nuisance stuff. I quit all that, and I genuinely just want to do good for society.
Though to be clear, it doesn't seem like he's done making videos, he's just done streaming. In fact, it doesn't even seem like he's done with the Michigan town where all these Skeeter Jean antics took place.
Weirdly enough, bro, I want to go back to Woodhaven, and I want to catch a pred there.
But at least, you know, judging from the reactions online, it appears like a lot of people, including a number of his fans, are not buying it. Right on Reddit, you've got just person after person saying this seems like a desperate effort to avoid jail time. Others believing he's genuine, but doubting that he's actually going to keep his promise. And then on YouTube, at least, all the top comments, they're just dunking on him for the I'm a multi-millionaire comment and for using the word genuinely so many times during his apology. Writing things like multi-genuinaire and genuinely maxing as a multi-millionaire and 20% apology, 80% genuinely. But then there are also people that say, hey, put Gideon aside, the message of streaming making you want to just make things go crazier and crazier, that is a really core problem that we are seeing online, right? And Gideon's kind of the perfect vessel for that, because a lot of what we saw with the pranksters, the nuisance content creators, a lot of that, it's really just evolved into being more streamer heavy, right? People just doing the craziest shit ever in hopes of getting live viewers, as well as people clipping the hell out of them because there's a monetary incentive. It also boosts your fame. And so then with that, you've got a number of people looking at whatever happens next with Gideon as maybe being a bit of a forecast for what this means for other creators moving forward. So while we're gonna have to wait to see how all this plays out, in the meantime, I do have to pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts about this whole situation here? And then there's more we gotta dive into in just a minute, but first let me thank a sponsor and say, you know, here's a fun fact. Cooking is not the part I avoid. It's really figuring out what to cook that's exhausting, which is why today's sponsor, HelloFresh, makes so much sense to me. I genuinely think that it gets me cooking things I'd probably never make on my own. I don't have to scroll through recipes for half an hour, buy 6 ingredients I'll use one time, and realize halfway through dinner I forgot something at the store. Everything shows up pre-portioned, ready to cook, and so I get the fun part of making dinner without all the planning that usually talks me out of it. And the meals, they don't get repetitive. HelloFresh has more than 80 recipes every month with flavors inspired by places like Vietnam, Morocco, the Caribbean, and more. I'm using ingredients like lemongrass, gochujang, curry paste, things that I probably would have walked right past in the grocery store. Like, it's made cooking less like another thing I have to do and more like something I get to do with my kids. So hey, go to HelloFresh.com/DeFranco10FM right now to get 10 free meals and free breakfast for life. 1 per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as a discount on your first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's HelloFresh.com/DeFranco10FM to get 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life. Because honestly, nothing hits like home cooking. But then diving right back into the news, Graham Plattner, as a politician, the Senate campaign, he might just be done.
Did Graham Plattner rape you?
By definition, yes. Absolutely.
So that woman is Jenny Rassicot, and the man that she is now accused of rape is Maine Senate candidate Graham Plattner. And he's been a focal point, a lightning rod this campaign season. He was introduced to the political world as a Marine veteran, oyster farmer, and until now, he's been seen as one of the Democratic Party's best hopes for flipping a Republican-held Senate seat in November. But he's been really pushing this progressive populist platform that we've been seeing success here and there. And at least until now, he's seemingly shed controversy after controversy, with that including things like having a tattoo that looked like a Nazi symbol, offensive online posts that he made over a period of several years, and allegations about his past treatment of women. But you've largely seen his supporters arguing, hey, all of that, it's just a distraction. It's an effort to undermine his campaign. But also, it did seem to be like there was a never-ending fire hose. And so last August, for example, there was that whole scandal. Plattner's wife told a senior campaign aide that he had been exchanging sexual messages with other women. But there you had a lot of people going, hey, it's a marriage, their relationship, it's none of our business, it's separate from politics. And then last month, you had the New York Times sharing stories of 3 women who had dated Plattner for years and said that he could be demeaning to women and in at least one case, physically threatening. And actually, Jenny Rassicot was one of those women. She described an incident that took place in 2021 in which Plattner arrived at her house drunk after she had asked him not to come over. And reportedly, and this is a big thing, she chose not to describe that encounter in any more detail, only saying that she found his behavior to be reckless and unsettling. But then what you had was Plattner winning his primary despite all that. And now, roughly a month later, she's come forward with what she says is the full truth of what happened that night, telling Politico and then CNN that Plattner forced her to have sex with him despite her repeated objections. Politico also spoke to the man that she dated after Plattner, who she had confided to about the alleged assaults, with them reporting that his account of what Rassicot told him matched what she told the outlet. They also spoke to a friend that Rassicot had told about the alleged assault last summer, shortly after Plattner launched his campaign, and the friend also recalled Rassicot telling her about the incident, including her saying that Plattner had been very drunk and wouldn't take no for an answer. And then in addition to all that, you had Rassicot sharing private years-old Facebook messages in which he told an acquaintance that she had ended up in a, quote, bad situation with Plattner and describing him as consensually careless and saying he doesn't listen to you when drunk. And then you also had her explaining that she ended up feeling compelled that she had to come forward after seeing the reaction to the Times story, which was dominated by a controversy about another woman by the name of Lindsay Fifield, whose allegations against Plattner, which didn't include sexual assault, being dismissed by a number of people because she's conservative and worked for Republican campaigns. And as far as Rassicot, she noted that she actually agrees with Plattner politically, which is also part of why she said she was hesitant to go public in the first place.
That was actually one of the reasons that I didn't come out, more towards the beginning. I do. I really agree with his politics. I think we need somebody with those political stances and who are willing to do the work. I'm just here to tell my story, to give a clearer picture of who he is and the type of past that he has.
6 fucking women.
And
it's been like 6 women.
I just think it's
in like
fair
last few
to
weeks.
the democratic process.
He's kind of cooked.
Let people know who they're voting for.
With that, you still quickly had the Plattner campaign coming out with a statement seeming to argue that Rassicot's story was politically motivated, saying these allegations are very serious and Graham vigorously denies them. They are also coached and coordinated by out-of-state establishment operatives, and adding, it is not a coincidence that this story comes a week before the ballot deadline, just as the previous false allegations came a week before the primary. No amount of desperate smears will stop this movement from seeing that vision through. And you then had Plattner posting a video on social media himself claiming any accusation of non-consensual behavior is categorically false, but he also seemed to suggest that he's at least considering dropping out.
Regardless of the inaccuracy of the reporting, but mindful of the political reality it will inflict, we are taking the time to reflect on the best path forward for the state that I love, the people that I love, the movement I belong to, and the goal of defeating Susan Collins.
And with all that, you then pretty much had the entire Democratic Party now pushing Plattner to remove himself from the race. And so that includes establishment Dems like Senator Chuck Schumer, who was really never a big fan of Plattner, to also very progressive supporters like Congressman Ro Khanna and Senator Elizabeth Warren, with Warren saying in a statement, there can be no tolerance for sexual assault, and adding, with so much at stake, the best path forward is for Graham Plattner to step aside as the Democratic nominee and address these serious allegations outside the Senate race. And then in addition to the politicians, you had groups like Planned Parenthood Action Fund, the country's largest abortion rights organization, which had recently rallied with Plattner, taking back its endorsement, along with others doing the same. Also with this, you had Lindsay Fifield, one of the women who had accused Plattner of toxic and physically threatening behavior, slamming Dems for not speaking out against him until now, writing, I actually understand why Democrat leaders didn't take our stories seriously when the Times reported them in June, but are taking them seriously now. It was by design. And then with that, she also slammed the New York Times, accusing them of failing to properly follow up on all the leads that she gave them for verifying her story. And then another reaction that's been getting a lot of attention is from former Republican Congressman and Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy, who told Fox News,
The one thing I know about Republicans, when we had a very bad candidate and found out, We didn't vote for that person. We walked away.
For better or for worse.
Yeah. When Matt Gaetz came forward, we got rid of him.
Though, of course, what he seems to be just for some reason forgetting is that Donald Trump, the Republican-elected president, besides having faced many accusations of sexual misconduct, has actually been found civilly liable for sexual abuse. Just so we're on the same page, the judge clarified afterward that what the jury found Trump did was in fact rape as commonly understood. But with all this, right, as far as what happens next, Plattner, he has only until July 13th to withdraw from this race. And then if he does, the main Democratic Party, they have only until July 27th to replace him. And while there's no official process for selecting a new nominee, party officials have already begun discussing possible plans, with options including a pop-up convention on the weekend of July 25th to choose a nominee, or holding a statewide caucus to basically redo the party's primary election. Though then also with this, you've had someone described as close to the campaign telling the New York Times, if Plattner was to step down, it would only be with a guarantee of being replaced by a candidate who he believes is true to the values and vision and policy agenda of the campaign that Maine voted for. So then with that, we've seen a few names being floated around as possible replacements for Plattner, but we're gonna have to wait to see what happens. Or whatever happens, like the road forward is incredibly messy, and that's putting it lightly. Right, Dem leadership, they can't just put like Janet Mills back in because the state effectively voted against her and her ideals. So then you're thinking of, you know, what's the candidate out there that's closest to copy pasting the progressive populist agenda that Plattner had thrown out there, but in an incredibly tight timeline, while also at the same time, if that were to happen, even if Plattner didn't say anything when he dropped out, it would kind of be an unsaid thing that the person that is being accused of being essentially a rapist endorsed this other candidate. But ultimately, we're going to see how all this plays out together. But then as we wait to see how that plays out, we should then also talk about the outrage that we're seeing around a new platform called Wildfire, because it is a prediction market specifically focused on wildfires in California. And its slogan is, you can't predict fire, but you can trade on it. And you have it positioning itself as a new way to monitor and track fire behavior, with the site explaining prediction markets harness the wisdom of crowds to surface what models and satellites might miss. Wildfire turns collective intelligence into better wildfire forecasting, one trade at a time. And it is a map of hotspots and ongoing fires, and allows you to wager on whether or not more acres will burn in a certain period of time. And while in its fine print, it does note that right now these wagers aren't real money, it's simulated trading, multiple reports say that the ability to bet with real money is in fact coming soon. And that's prompted a ton of concern, because even though betting on storms and weather isn't new, fire, it's not like rain or wind. Someone can start a fire. In fact, if you look into it, the vast majority of wildfires are caused by humans, like, at least in some way.
That should be your first thought if you're not
saying systems that tie financial gain to wildfire outcomes risk encouraging misuse, including arson, and are not compatible with our mission. And then they also sort of dismissed its use as a forecasting resource, saying the Forest Service does not use information from prediction markets for wildfire forecasting, and we do not rely on any system that treats wildfire as an event for speculation. Which I will say, I feel insane even having to repeat, because yeah, it feels like an idea so ridiculous and so stupid that it's actually social commentary about what prediction markets actually are. Though also, I do want to know, like, while this platform, it claims to be the first service specifically for trading just on California wildfires, this is not the first time that people have wagered on them. Or you might have seen that there was a ton of controversy last year when the fires in LA, they burned down thousands of people's homes and killed dozens of people. And that's because on Polymarket, you can bet on how far those fires would spread, what neighborhoods the fires would reach, and when they would be contained and more.
How did you,
and with that, you had
how did the fire get so crazy on the beach?
Gamifying
Like,
the pain and suffering of living,
not much plant
beings.
material
Actually,
to burn.
at the time, Polymarket took a similar angle to what Wildfire is doing now, insisting that the prediction markets can be used as tools. Explaining these markets address the same questions being discussed across cable news and X. We've proven that prediction markets can be an invaluable alternative information source for those seeking real-time quantitative data. But then with that, you had people pushing back instead of just saying what I would say of, stop lying, you fucking lying idiots. Instead, you had the LA Times talking to the director of USC's Center for Ethical Leadership and Decision-Making, who said, I have a hard time imagining that people are logging on to Polymarket to decide whether or not to evacuate. And he also said that it opens doors to tons of other issues. Because of course, there's the incentive to start fires, and then on top of that, it could lead to a callous attitude toward others suffering. If we are gamifying life and death issues, it could really negatively influence culture and society in a way we don't like. And then also the timing here is wild because it is currently fire season, and it could actually be a pretty bad one. In the spring, experts warn that the record-breaking snow drought in some areas of the state, it could lead to a worsened fire season, as there's going to be less snow melt and moisture to protect the land. And then on top of that, there was record-breaking heat in March, meaning that vegetation started growing early and then drying out weeks ahead of schedule. So then what do you know? The season came ahead of schedule, with fires burning thousands of acres across Southern California in May. Then also, because we have an El Nino event heading California's way this year, the rest of the fire season's kind of up in the air. And honestly, like, this is my take. I think the only prediction marker regarding fires like this that I would support would be to bet the over on how many of the people that work for and support wildfire die in a wildfire. That could then maybe be some market manipulation I could get behind, right? No, I'm just joking, legally speaking. And then we've got even more that we gotta dive into in just a minute, but first let me thank a sponsor and say, here is a reminder that scammers have absolutely zero shame. Like the new scam where you get a message saying a loved one's been in an accident, you panic, you click the photo, and instead you install malware that quietly steals your banking information. That's the kind of stuff that makes today's sponsor NordVPN feel less optional. NordVPN, it's become more than just a VPN. It is an all-in-one digital security app with a next-generation antivirus that helps stop online threats before they become your problem. And one feature I really like is threat protection, right? It helps block malicious links, dangerous downloads, and scam sites even when I'm not connected to the VPN. Right? Because one bad click, that's all it takes, and I'd rather have another layer of protection than hope that I never make a mistake. Whenever I'm traveling or using hotel or airport Wi-Fi, Nord's already on. It's just part of my routine. And one subscription, it protects up to 10 devices, so my laptop, phone, tablet, and more, they're all covered. Especially as scammers, they're getting better at exploiting fear and urgency, which is exactly why these scams work. So hey, upgrade your online security by scanning that code or going to nordvpn.com/Phil to get an exclusive discount on a 2-year plan plus or extra months free when you use my link. That's nordvpn.com/Phil, and it's completely risk-free with NordVPN's 30-day money-back guarantee. And then let's dive back into the news, our final block today. More news you need to know, starting with Walmart. Right, because Walmart, they say they're cutting prices to, quote, make the most of the summer, and you got Trump. He's taking credit for all of it, right? Ground beef, that's dropping by 12%. The price of cherries, that's getting cut in half. Coke, it's going down. Household products, toys, clothes,
I mean, it might be from like last month.
And with this, you had Trump saying on Truth Social,
What's
they're
the
doing all this
from
at
last
his administration's request to celebrate our great country's 250th birthday. But as far as Walmart, they haven't responded to his post yet, and their announcement, it didn't mention anything about a conversation with the White House. You're just seeing things like their executive VP saying customers count on Walmart to deliver the value they need every day, so that's why they're making even more investments in price, helping everyone save more. And then this is also weird timing on Trump's part because Walmart was one of the many companies that spoke out against his tariffs last year. Their CEO at the time said the merchandise that we import comes from all over the world. All of the tariff creates cost pressure for us. And so he said higher tariffs were going to result in higher prices, and that is exactly what happened. So as far as Trump at the time, he said Walmart should stop trying to blame tariffs for raising prices. They should eat the tariffs and not charge valued customers anything. And then on top of what many saw as just having
so
a
he is
pretty
admitting that
unrealistic take,
tariffs
and then also
are more
just generally
expensive
brushed
if they
off
have to eat the
affordability
cost.
issues as fake news.
The word affordability is a
He's literally
con
saying
job
it increases the
by
price.
Democrats.
While
So while Trump,
constantly
he's
insisting
trying to
it
frame all
doesn't.
this as a win for his team, you get a lot
You
of
have to
people
eat
calling
the fucking
BS.
hit.
And so now what it seems like actually happened is that Walmart, they took the refund money that they got after the Supreme Court shot down Trump's tariffs and used it to cut customers a break. Or because with that money, you had Walmart's chief financial officer saying, we think the single best return that we can have on $1 of capital right now is to invest in the customer and invest in price. And so that's why you might have seen some people out there pushing back on Trump's post saying the price cuts are offset by the tariff refunds the company's getting back from the Trump administration. Or saying that Trump, he's trying to take credit for a solution to a problem that he created. Also in the news, we should talk about how a college football coach was just hit with multiple charges after a freshman collapsed and died during his first day of practice. Because Mark Kolbis was a strength and conditioning coach for Bucknell University's football team. And that day at practice, he forced Calvin Dickey Jr. and the rest of the players to do 100 up-downs along with some full-body plank drills. And that's after officials said that other coaches told Kolbis those exercises were unsafe and adding that they went against the training he got from the university as well. Right? And Dickey, he had sickle cell, he was visibly struggling with the drills reportedly, but Kolbis, he didn't step in to help until he'd already passed out, according to Pennsylvania AG Dave Sunday. With Dickey then eventually being taken to the hospital, though he died 2 days later. And what the autopsy showed you is that he had given in to complications from his sickle cell in combination with the training exercises, his weight, and other issues. And with that, Sunday said that Kolbis had put Dickey through an intentional deliberate hazing. And so he's now been charged with felony aggravated hazing, and Sunday saying, this law exists because it recognizes what hazing is. Criminal conduct that in the best possible scenario humiliates and dehumanizes an individual. And at its worst, takes lives and leaves families and friends forever devastated. Right along with that charge, Kolbis is facing misdemeanor counts of involuntary manslaughter and reckless endangerment. Though his attorney said the strength and conditioning program was appropriate and in accordance with the training that Mr. Kolbis received. And adding there are facts and other circumstances surrounding this matter that, once presented at the appropriate time, will demonstrate that Mr. Kolbis did not commit the crimes charged. But for now, his bail is set for $10,000 and there's a preliminary hearing set for July 28th. And then the last bit of news today is that there's another lawsuit against DHS. Right, and this time, we got a guy by the name of David Strieber who claims that they violated his First Amendment rights by tracking him down over an email that he sent to former ICE Director Todd Lyons. Right, in response to Renee Good, now it's Freddie's death, Strieber told him he was a monstrous human being, comparing him to a Nazi who oversaw the secret police, saying you will seek to lose yourself to escape the burden of knowing the truth about yourself, but wherever you go, you will find yourself. You will torment yourself until your last day on earth. Right, and that It was back in January, so when DHS agents came looking for him a few weeks ago, about 5 months later, he said, writing an email to the head of ICE seemed like the least I could do to express my sense of outrage. I never dreamed it would lead to a knock on my door by federal officers or descending on my hotel in the dark of night. And he was actually on a trip to Finland with his daughter when they first showed up at his house, and they left his wife with a written warning for him, saying that the email he sent was considered a threat and that he may have violated federal law. And well, his wife told the agents when he'd be back that apparently just wasn't soon enough. Because then agents tried to confront him at a New York City hotel before he could even make it home. But there, you had the hotel staff turning them away. So that same night, they reportedly hit him with call after call, leaving him voicemails trying to get in touch. He even had to tell his 7-year-old daughter that he might get confronted on the way home, which he said brought her to tears, saying that she didn't want them to kill him. And now you've got his legal team firing back, saying, if someone is really threatening a government official, you don't wait 5 months to act on it. The fact that authorities didn't respond immediately shows that Striever presented no threat. And while you have DHS saying they investigate all threats towards employees and officers like Lyons, they haven't actually specified why Striever's email was considered a credible threat in the first place. And so with that, you also had his legal team saying, Americans have a clear right to criticize government officials. When federal agents come to your door and ask you to stop engaging in political speech, it's an act of intimidation that the Constitution doesn't tolerate. And that is when you had Homeland Security Secretary Mark Wayne Mullen, who's also named in the lawsuit, claiming any allegation that DHS and its components are attempting to squash free speech is categorically false. And while we're going to have to see what happens with the courts, as far as Striever's take on all this, he says, I cherish our right to speak openly about issues of public concern. I hope others will not be discouraged from peacefully expressing their views, even when those views are critical of the government. And that, my friend, you beautiful bastard, I think is a fantastic place to end. You might be tired of the bullshit, emotionally exhausted, but never let them make you shut up. Well, you still have the choice and the ability. Use those. With that said, thank you for watching
Nico's
this Tuesday
combo
Franco
is
show.
rough.
I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.
Rough.
Today, I'm traveling around Israel and Palestine, one of the most contested pieces of land on earth.
And I don't give a what they're gonna do in Gaza.
A place that everyone already has an opinion on.
We want to live in peace.
Nobody wants innocent people to be killed.
There's no country like Israel.
First of all, we have the right to exist. Second of all, this is our country.
When people think of this region, they think of war, religion, and politics.
We're going to have Gaza. We don't have to buy it. We will have Gaza.
But beyond all of that, there are millions of ordinary people just trying to live their lives. And that's the part that nobody really shows you. What I will say is that there is a difference between a government and its people, and I've always said this, and I think this is especially true in Israel. Over the next few weeks, I'll be traveling alone through Israel and Palestine.
Looks like someone Jewish threw something at a Muslim shop owner, and now something else has happened. Thank you. Which way?
I'll speak to Israelis, Palestinians, settlers, religious communities, and try to understand what daily life here actually feels like.
The United Nations investigation team says Israel has committed genocide against Palestinians in the Gaza Strip.
Forget what you've seen in the media. I'm going to show you the real Palestine and Israel. I'm going in, I'm going to listen to both sides, I'm going to open my mind, and I'm going to let people speak. So let's fly to Tel Aviv and see if they let me in.
Welcome everyone to Abu Dhabi Airport. It's that time again where we're heading on an adventure. And I've been thinking about how to do this intro for a long time because it's such a hard intro to make. But what I will say is, in all of the scriptures, the Quran, the Bible, and the Torah, the most common phrase in all of these is one saying which goes something like, "Do not fear." And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's head to Tel Aviv, Israel. Hello. Thank you.
Pastor Harry.
Yes. Salamat. Let's talk about what happened when I arrived at the airport. First of all, I was reported on the flight by my next door neighbor. He snitched on me because I was deleting some Palestinian contacts on my phone. I knew that Israel immigration were going to ask me lots of questions and potentially go through my phone, so I just decided that I was going to delete the contacts. That was very stupid of me to do it on the flight. The intelligence agencies, Mossad, whoever it was, they quickly got me out of the queue for immigration, and I went straight to the office and spent about between 4 and 5
got
hours
Gunblade.
between waiting and having multiple interviews. My heart was beating out my chest. I thought, I'm screwed. I am not getting in. I thought there was absolutely no way that they are letting me in. I am absolutely screwed. And to make things worse, I sat down, and the first thing he mentioned was he read my bracelet, which is Arabic writing, says my name. And obviously Arabic writing in a Jewish Israeli company was not super pleasing. And he said, "Oh, Harry." And I said, "Oh, you speak fluent Arabic." And then you guys won't believe what happened next. I punched him in the face, knocked him out clean, and then immigration said, "Okay, you can just go." They were generally not bad. They were asking a lot of intrusive questions. How much money do I make? Who do I work for? Why was I in Lebanon 4 times? Why did I go to Yemen? Why did I go to Somalia? Why did I go to Afghanistan? I said, you can just watch all of my YouTube videos if you want. They also found a clip of me saying that I love Palestine on social media, and they were just like very annoyed about that. And at the end of it, the officer said to me, "My colleagues don't want to let you in. We don't want to let you in, but they let me in." And I don't know how. I don't know why. So to the Israeli immigration officer who let me in, thank you.
I had Q. I got up
Enjoy
that
the video.
second.
Guys, I never thought I'd say this, but welcome to Tel Aviv. Welcome to Tel Aviv beachfront. As you can see, Tel Aviv is completely normal. This is life. We're in the middle of a war right now, and life goes on. Beach life goes on. It also feels really strange knowing that just 1 hour in that direction is the Gaza Strip. It's like 60 kilometers. It's really hard to understand that Tel Aviv is right like this.
The U.S. intelligence community picked up something shocking when going through
Nuclear
earthquake
war,
data, as one
not
does.
ideal.
They found a remote seismic station in Kazakhstan had detected a very small earthquake that only had a magnitude of 2.75.
Maybe I should have went with
But its
fuel
point of
power.
origin was extremely suspicious because it came from near China's Lop Nor nuclear site, which is where they've tested atomic bombs until they stopped in 1996. The Pentagon now believes it was a top-secret Chinese nuclear weapons test designed to be hidden from the rest of the world. China's foreign minister shot back, saying that the allegations are completely groundless and that the U.S. is only claiming this to resume their own nuclear weapons tests. It was a geopolitical equivalent of he said, she said nuclear weapons edition. So who was lying? And why does that even matter when the United States government already has many times more nuclear weapons? In an extremely rare response, the U.S. intelligence agencies then decided to go public with their assessment. There's a planet-wide surveillance network designed to catch anyone trying to secretly detonate a nuclear weapon. So don't even try it. It's made up of seismic sensors that are buried in remote deserts, hydrophones listening beneath the oceans, and atmospheric detectors constantly searching for radioactive particles. It's a global burglar alarm for nuclear weapons. From this, U.S. intelligence provided declassified proof that China's building hundreds of new missile silos and rapidly expanding their nuclear arsenal.
The U.S. government is aware that China has conducted nuclear explosive tests. These tests violate test ban commitments.
Just a year later in 2021, analysts at the Pentagon discovered China was building something massive in the middle of the Yunnan Desert. It's located in China's remote northwestern Gansu province, deep inside the country. But before we get into that, today's episode is sponsored by War Thunder, the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made that's available for free on PC, consoles, and mobile devices. My favorite part is getting to command from over 2,500
He
tanks,
fucking
planes,
clicked R,
helicopters, and ships
guys.
from 10 major nations,
It's fucking
ranging from
Faker.
biplanes and armored cars from the 1920s all the way to the fighter jets and main battle
gave me,
tanks
like,
of
no
today.
attack speed.
They have an all-new mobile version for iOS and Android that's
Whatever.
got very intuitive controls. How immersive is this game? Incredibly detailed vehicles, check. Realistic graphics, check. Authentic sound effects that place you right at the helm of the most powerful war machines of our time, check, check, and check. It has really impressive cutaway damage X-ray view as well. Join a worldwide community of over 95 million players
What?
in epic PvP battles today. War Thunder is available for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile. For a limited time, new and returning players on PC and console
Wild.
who haven't played in at least 6 months claim a massive bonus pack that includes the exclusive Eagle of Valor vehicle decorator, 100,000 Silver Lions, 7 days of premium account, plus multiple premium vehicles. Just use my link in the pinned comment or the video description. They found a sprawling grid of gigantic inflatable domes scattered across the landscape. Hidden underneath them, China was constructing 120 brand new nuclear missile silos, capable of reaching anywhere in the United States in 30 minutes. It was bad news for everyone who didn't want to die in thermonuclear war. At the same time as China's nuclear weapons program was rapidly expanding, tensions over Taiwan have continued to soar. Xi Jinping warned President Trump during their in-person meeting in China that mishandling disagreements over Taiwan could push both nuclear powers into quote-unquote a dangerous place, which is a very diplomatic way of saying we're very close to ending it all. We'll see how some parts of the nuclear program in China have been transparent, overt, and available for the public to see, while other parts have been strangely hidden, which is very unusual given China's history of nuclear weapons strategy. Since the 1960s, China's nuclear strategy has been fascinating. It's always been defined by kind of doing the absolute bare minimum. They've been a bunch of nuclear slackers, if you will. While the United States and Soviet Union were duking it out, racing to build thousands of warheads during the Cold War, China sat a few plays out and stayed more chill with under 300 warheads in total, barely enough to glass the world. This is because many Chinese strategists argued that matching American numbers was pointless, because a few of their surviving warheads could still devastate major cities in America. Very Sun Tzu meta level strategy there. And the reason any of that is relevant today is because these series of 3 top secret declassified documents that were released by the American intelligence agencies, and they each track China's nuclear weapons development strategy. What they say is that for many decades, it was all about slow, steady, restrained development. The CIA was using human sources on the ground combined with spy photos, specifically highlighting how China does not appear to be joining any kind of arms race. How modest of them. But there's evidence the real reason China only had a few nukes is because they were unable to build thousands. So the declassified documents repeatedly mention limits due to Soviets no longer helping China and difficulty in procuring the expensive and difficult to enrich uranium. China's nuclear forces were so underfunded and such a second thought at the time that they were originally called the Second Artillery Corps. Mao basically said, I don't know, just throw them in with the artillery guys. Because historically, China relied on a handful of old, clunky, liquid-fueled DF-5 missiles in order to reach America, but they had severe limitations. But the problem with those liquid-fueled missiles is that they took hours to fuel up before they could even be launched, so they're sitting ducks during that time period. If an American satellite sees you pumping rocket fuel into a silo, the United States knows exactly what you're doing, and they're gonna blow your silo to kingdom come before that missile even leaves the tube. We've all been there. That's why for decades, China relied heavily on underground tunnels and mobile launches because it lacked a truly survivable ground launch missile option. Its sea-based deterrent was also lacking. So liquid-fueled missiles like the old DF-5 are incredibly fragile. If you transport them when you're in fully fueled mode and you have a fender bender or a slight bump, it would cause the highly corrosive toxic fuel inside to leak and explode, killing everyone inside that mountain. That's a huge party foul in Chinese culture. Therefore, the Second Artillery Corps in China had to store the warhead separately from the missile and the fuel, which slows down response time by hours. And they had this terrifying realization that the United States military could easily destroy all of their nuclear-based deterrent in a hypothetical preemptive strike. This is part of what drove the massive modernization effort that we're about to see. So in December 2015, China's Second Artillery Corps is officially elevated to a full military branch of its own. They're renamed the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, never to be dead named or lumped in with the artillery again. Along with this promotion came just an obscenely high budget. They took that new money, they got strippers and below because there's a lot of corruption in China, like seriously. Then they phased out their old dinosaur missiles and got the massive DF-41. This uses solid fuel. I'm an infantryman, not a scientist, but it's essentially a rubbery, high-explosive chemical compound that's poured straight into the rocket casing at the factory and then left to harden. What that means is it doesn't need to be fueled in the field. It's just ready to rock 24/7, able to hit any target in the United States from deep in mainland China. No need to sleep on it to see if you're still mad in the morning, just go straight ahead. These missiles are perfect for China's new static ground-based launch sites. Now, the scale of this nuclear expansion is difficult to comprehend. The infrastructure covers thousands of square kilometers in the desert. The evidence of the buildup is even viewable from outer space. The gigantic Chinese military complex is only now starting to really take shape in the desert. Xi Jinping is building a huge, sprawling web that has launch pads which are connected to hardened reinforced bunkers, which connect to communications
I
nodes.
didn't click the
Each launch silo is
minion.
placed about 4 kilometers apart from each other to prevent multiple ones from being taken out by one single American missile. Shortly after the UN silo missile discovery, American satellite analysts at Space Force found another huge missile field in Hami in eastern Xinjiang, reassuring to be able to see the evidence of where the heat death of the Earth may take place from Google Maps. The second field contains 80 new nuclear-capable missile silos. These are run by mysterious octagon-shaped facilities that you can see here. Surrounding the core is this ring of buildings that house military personnel. The third layer is likely storage of military vehicles and ballistic missile launchers. A Reuters analysis wasn't sure what these next buildings here are for, but it's safe to assume it's not a humanitarian aid site. Then there are armored bunkers and fortified weapons storage areas. There are massive airfields and rail networks that link to these mysterious octagon bases to then the Hami missile silos. Hans Christensen, who's the director of the Federation of American Scientists and Nuclear Information Project, said, quote, "I've never seen anything quite like it. It's an extraordinary effort. What makes it unique is that it's surrounded by a ring of air defense batteries and electronic warfare equipment that's meant to jam enemy aircraft. The extensive anti-air systems near the nuclear launch silos are extremely unusual. They're not seen in the United States or Russian similar facilities. We'll see that these AA systems are a hint to why China is building these missile silos in the first place. In total, China will now have about 350 nuclear missile silos, about the same as the United
Probably
States.
my last
To
game.
put this expansion and scale into perspective,
Not enough
that
doom
is
and
more
gloom.
than 10 times the number of silos that
Listening to
China
news while
previously
playing League,
operated
that's
in
like
their entire history. The current
basically
buildup represents
masochism.
one of the biggest reversals and shifts of nuclear policy by any major power since the end of the Cold War. And now, the U.S. intelligence community has assessed that China is racing to double their stockpile of nuclear weapons by 2030. Is it deterrence, is it coercion, or something more aggressive? They looked at satellite imagery from 2023 and early 2024, and what they found shocked them. The U.S. military analysts identified at least one brand new horizontal tunnel at the Northern Tunnel test area. The quote-unquote spoil piles of excavated earth and rock totaled more than 1,500 square meters of extra earth. So imagine standing in a man-made cave the size of a tall building. This is what you would be looking at there, and this is a clear indication that China carved out a huge new underground chamber. Analysts observed the construction of at least 2 deep vertical shafts. What spooked them the most is that horizontal tunnels are typically used for low-yield nuclear weapons tests. These tests suggest that Xi Jinping is testing tactical nuclear weapons. Vertical tunnels are typically dug for higher yield nuclear weapons explosions. The reason for this is because they allow for far better containment of highly radioactive material. The US assessed that China used what's called a decoupling method, so they detonated the device in a large underground cavern like this to muffle the explosive force and dampen the seismic signature. It would almost have been a relief if they had been testing giant strategic warheads instead, because leaders are less likely to use those. But we'll see how a low-yield tactical nuclear weapon is more likely to actually be used during a conflict. But the United States maintains roughly 5,000 nuclear warheads. Russia has even more. Both countries spent decades lecturing everyone else about strategic nuclear stability. So why is China's nuclear expansion right now anyone's concern? Head of STRATCOM, Air Force General Anthony J. Cotton, called it a quote-unquote strategic breakout that was moving at breathtaking speeds, because many of the silos appeared to be under construction simultaneously. What's most shocking is how quickly these all appeared. The pace suggests that Beijing is racing against someone or something, because nuclear planners can usually adapt to gradual changes. What worries them, though, is when a country suddenly begins building hundreds of silos, rapidly increasing the warhead stockpile and expanding the nuclear infrastructure needed to support much larger forces, all at the same time. From Washington's point of view, they're concerned specifically about the speed and scale of this expansion. That's what we need to pay attention to. In response, some officials in South Korea and Taiwan are requesting that the US redeploy nuclear weapons in the region as part of a NATO-style nuclear sharing umbrella in Asia. America once had 950 nuclear weapons stationed in South Korea. But why run low-yield nuclear tests? One hint was when Xi Jinping referenced the Thucydides trap. in his speech when President Trump visited. This is a theory that argues war becomes more likely when a rising power threatens to overtake an established power. In other words, Xi Jinping was suggesting to Trump that the United States and China could be drifting towards the same kind of great power collision that has sparked major wars throughout history. Experts have two different opinions on why China's fast building up.
Don't
their
worry, I
nuclear
blocked it for you,
force.
Vlad.
Many national security experts in Washington believe that it's to make sure that the American military cannot credibly knock out their arsenal with a first strike. A lot has changed when it comes to precision weapons since the Cold War. Back then, you couldn't fire a
I'm losing
missile
so
at
much
something the
gold
size of a
XP.
penny from hundreds of miles away from standoff distance.
Rolling.
Now, American long-range conventional missiles like the JASSM-ER and America's expansion of their stealth bomber fleet, where they're building over 225 new B-21 bombers, has changed this calculation. The B-21 is explicitly designed for the military planners call inside-out operations. That means the stealth bomber is built to penetrate deep into the Chinese mainland, flying potentially completely undetected right through their air defense networks, which is now what explains why there's so many air defense systems around these octagon Chinese nuclear sites. Once inside, the B-21 bomber can use conventional bombs against China's mobile nuclear missile launchers right in their own sanctuaries, before the Chinese even know that they're under attack. During the Iran War, B-2 stealth bombers and fighter jets hit Iran's underground buried missile silos. But in a war with China, these missile silos are dual use. That means you don't know which have conventional missiles and which are armed with nuclear missiles. One reason China may be building so many of these missile silos is because the sea-based leg of their nuclear deterrent still has a weakness. China operates this fleet of Jin-class ballistic missile submarines, but American defense officials have long assessed that these Chinese nuclear submarines are significantly louder than their American counterparts, and they can be found, fixed, and destroyed. Hundreds of hardened silos may be Beijing's way of compensating for weaknesses elsewhere in the nuclear triad. However, the other perspective of China's nuclear buildup comes from the Carnegie Foundation researcher Tong Zhao, who gave an alternative take. He says that Xi Jinping attaches great geopolitical importance to nuclear weapons as a means of demonstrating China's power. To Xi Jinping, it's a symbolic use of military power. It's designed to influence America's perception of the balance of power with Taiwan. The reason Mao Zedong in the 1950s said that he originally wanted to develop nuclear weapons was to be free of coercion, free of powers with more nukes telling them what to do. Missile defense has always created a strange arms race. Every interceptor encourages an adversary to build more offensive missiles. Every offensive missile encourages the defender to build more interceptors. The result is a technological treadmill where both sides spend billions of dollars trying to solve a problem that the other side immediately recreates. But not all of these silos will actually be filled with nuclear weapons in them. Some are going to be empty. This tactic is straight from the old Cold War playbook. It's called sponge theory. You want to sponge up as many hits as possible. You dig 250 holes in the ground for silos, but you only put actual nuclear missiles in, say, about 50 of them. The other 200 are empty decoys. The enemy then absolutely has no idea which silos are loaded and which ones are just empty concrete tubes. Therefore, it tries to guarantee that destroying China's nuclear arsenal in a preemptive strike, an enemy force would have to expend over 250 nuclear weapons and missiles to hit every hole out in the desert. But there's another theory, one that is a bit more aggressive and significantly more nefarious. Some intelligence analysts believe China is actively seeking what's called nuclear overmatch. For a long time, China's maintained a strict no first use policy, meaning they're publicly promised that they would never be the first ones to drop a nuke in a conflict. But if they build a massive, unquestionable nuclear arsenal, including those low-yield tactical nukes that they've been secretly testing underground at Lop Nur, it creates a terrifying nuclear umbrella. Under this massive nuclear umbrella, the PLA could launch a D-Day-style conventional invasion of Taiwan. They would be betting everything on the assumption that the United States would be entirely unwilling to intervene and save the island if it meant risking a massive nuclear exchange that could wipe Los Angeles, Seattle, and New York off the map. It is a strategy of nuclear blackmail. In the public consciousness, a nuclear weapon is a city killer. We think of Hiroshima or the massive Tsar bomb tested in the Soviet Union days, but modern military strategy has evolved into a terrifying concept called Escalate to De-Escalate. Imagine a scenario where the Chinese military launches an invasion of Taiwan. The United States responds by sending 2 massive aircraft carrier strike groups into the Philippine Sea to intervene. In the past, China would have to rely on conventional anti-ship missiles to stop the American fleet.
Ow.
But what if China fires a low-yield tactical nuclear weapon? Not a city killer, but a tiny, relatively speaking, 5-kiloton warhead designed purely to detonate above the ocean. At that localized blast could instantly vaporize the carrier group, but it wouldn't kill millions of civilians. This creates a terrifying dilemma for the US president at this point. Do you respond by launching Minuteman III ICBMs and glassing Beijing, knowing that China will immediately launch their own DF-41s and destroy major cities in North America? Are you willing to trade Los Angeles and New York to avenge a single aircraft carrier fleet in the middle of the ocean? This is why analysts believe China is expanding the Lop Nor facility and why they're building mock aircraft carriers in the desert to fire at. They're testing subcritical designs to perfect these tiny tactical warheads. The vertical shafts and the horizontal tunnels identified by analysts are the exact facilities needed to ensure that these miniature warheads work perfectly. Because nuclear weapons are some of the most complicated death machines ever built, and their functionality needs to be checked and double-checked. The US currently maintains a fleet of about 44 to 50 ground-based interceptors, or GBIs, that are located in silos in Alaska and California. Historically, the United States claimed that these GBIs were just there to shoot down a few rogue accidental missiles that were launched by unpredictable nations like North Korea. If America can use a huge fleet of stealth bombers to hunt down and destroy 80% of China's nuclear arsenal on the ground before they even launch, and then the American use of 50 GBI interceptors can shoot down the remaining 20% of China's missiles, that actually manages to make their nuclear deterrence zero. You have been mathematically negated. While China's digging 250 silos in the desert at this breakneck speed, what is America doing to modernize its own silo fleet? The United States relies on the old aging Minuteman III ICBMs, which have been sitting in holes in Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming since the 70s. The replacement program is called the LGM-35A Sentinel program, but the Sentinel program is currently somewhat of a train wreck. It's $1 billion over budget and suffering from years of scheduling delays. While China uses state-controlled construction companies to pour concrete 24/7 without having to worry about environmental impact studies, this means that the next decade there's going to be a highly dangerous window of vulnerability. China's new massive arsenal solid-fueled DF-41s will be fully operational, while America will still be relying on some 50-year-old missiles and hoping that the B-21 bomber will roll off the Northrop Grumman assembly line fast enough to fill the gap. If China achieves nuclear parity with the United States in terms of their massive ICBMs, it essentially creates a shield that allows them to use low-yield nukes on the battlefield with impunity, knowing the US won't risk global annihilation. What makes this nuclear weapons buildup different from previous Chinese military modernization efforts is that it cannot be hidden. Submarines with nukes can disappear beneath the earth. Aircraft with nuclear weapons are near impossible to track and are limited in range that they can launch from. But concrete silos scattered across the desert are obviously visible from space for all of us to see. The construction itself is meant to send a message, I think. And the scary thought is China's secret nuclear test may have also been meant to be detected by those seismic systems. Those secret nuclear weapons tests may have been meant as a message as well. To learn more, check out this video about US Black Ops in China or this playlist on Chinese military analysis. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy, ending transmission. Again, thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to play it for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, or mobile now by using my link in the pinned comment or the video description. New and returning players that haven't played in 6 months will also receive a massive bonus pack across PC and consoles, including multiple premium vehicles and other goodies. Available for a limited time only, so make sure not to miss out.
Where'd my clone go? What? Not doing anything.
Tools from Harbor Freight are doing hard work in real garages across America. Like
I
Nico's
did not mean to
one-man
click
shop in
that.
Illinois,
That's fine.
whereas Daytona Jack does all the heavy lifting, and his Hercules Impact Wrench and Icon Torque Wrench make quick work of tough jobs. Nico demands affordable tools that don't quit because he never quits. Harbor Freight, built for tool people.
Like me.
Coming soon, get a free 5-gallon bucket when you spend $29.99 in store.
The same group of scammers has been calling me for months now. They think I'm an old man with $300,000 worth of Bitcoin, so no matter what I say or do, they just keep calling me. This time they're back with a crazy plan, but it's gonna be their last plan. They're not calling me back after this.
Kevin? Yeah, do you remember me? We had a word with regarding some business plans.
I think you were gonna you had a presentation you were gonna do for me?
I'll show it to you on your computer. I'll email you.
And then for the video call, is it on Zoom?
Sure. Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, great.
Yeah, in half an hour I'll call you.
All right.
Okay.
No way he does that, right? Like, on a scale of 1 to 10, there's no shot. He's gonna have an excuse. It'll be like, oh, sorry, it's just my dog ate my Zoom password. They do end up calling. But first, today's video is sponsored by MySudo. I think it was about 5 years ago when I realized that if you Googled my name, not Kitboga, you could find my entire life story. Like, everything was just out there, publicly. My children's names, the day my wife and I got married, the first hand-me-down car that I got. It was just there. I didn't really like that. To the point where I remember telling my wife that we probably should move and change our names and figure out if you can just electively sign up for Witness Protection Program or something like that. Turns out it's not very easy. And that's partially because every single thing that you sign up for these days is asking you for a name, an email address, and a phone number. And most people use the same name, email address, and phone number for everything, like I did. The problem is, inevitably you will be involved with a data breach like I was. In fact, if we wait like 5 seconds, there probably was a data breach. Don't quote me on that, I don't know this. I looked it up, it is insane. Please be careful about what you share online. One of the most reliable ways I've been able to maintain some privacy and security is by separating different parts of my life. I use an app called MySudo. They are sponsoring the video today. I highly recommend you check them out. I have 9 different identities.
Do they even have crit handles anymore?
Hooked up to my cell phone right now.
I have not gotten one.
That I have 9 different
In a
names,
while.
cell phone numbers, email addresses, and virtual credit cards that are completely separate from one another. You might not be able to erase everything that you've put on the internet, but you can control what you share now. If you want to see what it's like to have your own pseudo with a phone number and email address, you can try it free for 30 days, and I think you'll start to see all of the different opportunities you would have to give an alias or new identity or new pseudo to all the different things that you're signing up for.
I'm ready with the presentation. Let me know when I can present you that.
I mean, I'm ready now. Are you going to send me the Zoom invite via email?
I'm just facing some problem with my Zoom. Should I show it to you on the remote?
What do you mean
turn
you're
on your
facing
computer
some
and then
problems?
I'm just facing some internet issues. Like my Zoom is not responding.
Oh, dang. I like to watch the presenter.
Hey, you want to watch me?
Well, yeah. I mean, I gotta see the passion. I gotta see the fire in your eyes. You know, that's half.
Yeah,
that's half the battle. I'm talking about investing a lot of money here. You know.
I do understand that. Firstly, let's see the presentation.
I didn't know what their plan was, but my plan was pretty simple. If they want me to invest, then they have to get on a video call. I mean, we got to meet face to face, right? We're going to go in business together.
I gotta get the
And
bag.
that means I could get more information out of them and watch them respond to my completely ridiculous questions.
I swear they don't have crit handles
Let's
anymore.
connect on the remote. You need to search Ultra Viewer. Let me just tell you about the product that we have. If you ever owned an iPhone, you would be aware of you cannot record the calls on the iPhone, right? Do you know that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Who asked?
And app. I'm sorry.
What are we talking about?
I'm talking about the product that for the business proposal.
Oh! my gosh. Okay. I thought there was going to be a presentation. I didn't see anything on my computer, so.
Yeah, I'll show you the.
I'm sorry.
Listen.
Jeez, forget I said that then. All right.
I was telling you, the iPhone doesn't gives you the option to record the calls. Okay. It doesn't have the feature, so we have invented a device which can record the calls for iPhone.
You made a device?
The portable device.
My guy made a tape recorder. Do you think he actually is trying to make this? Is this like this man's dream? I actually don't know what's about to happen. Is he not role playing at this point? He like invented a tape recorder for iPhones, and he thinks I'm gonna.
Oh my God.
The device name would be Mag Recorder. Okay. So.
Okay.
Oh, that didn't.
I just need to take a minute. This is real life. Wow.
Yeah. So it's the mixture of a MagSafe and the recorder that can charge your phone and record your calls at the same time. Okay. So the device name is Mag Recorder. All right, you would be able to see that on the top.
Guys, I have found a new passion. It is this, whatever this is. It is. I think he's actually presenting his idea to.
Your inhibitor is respawning soon.
How to find the meaning of life on Airbnb. Book a home that'll let you reflect, literally.
Hey, that's me.
Then book a stargazing tour and realize we're basically Stardust. Then book a private chef, because Stardust has still gotta eat.
Nom nom.
With Homes Experiences Services, some trips are better on Airbnb.
This is all public. So the government once had a DARPA program called LifeLog, built to track every email, every photo, every location, every purchase a person made all in one place. They killed it on February 4th, 2004. The next day, Mark Zuckerberg filed the LLC for the Facebook Incorporated. Scale 1 to 10, how much of a coincidence is that?
A 1 or 2. There are some people, I'm not one of them, maybe you're not one of them, who are constantly thinking about how to monetize literally everything. They also have very deep connections in government. Well, we've known since Tom Drake went public in 2002 that NSA is intercepting every phone call, every text message, every email. Okay, why not go farther than that and intercept everything else? If DARPA was doing it, he knew DARPA was doing it because he has contracts in government, sensitive contracts, and he knows that they dropped it. Why not pick it up and figure out how to monetize it? I believe that's what happened.
Have you ever worked for Facebook?
But a guy that I worked with, my first job at headquarters after I got back from Athens, guy had been chief of a gigantic station, so he was well up there in the senior intelligence service. He resigned, and we were like, what? What do you mean you resigned? He's like, you guys, he goes, this Facebook thing, and I had like vaguely heard of it. He said, they made me an offer that was ridiculous. And then I never saw him again. So there are a lot of senior CIA,
work
FBI,
tomorrow.
NSA people that went to Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and
Have a great
LinkedIn
one.
and everywhere else.
OpenAI recently.
OpenAI.
GG.
Will Hurd. I don't know if you've ever heard of Will Hurd.
He was the former director of NSA?
No.
No.
Will was